All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to another Code Live stream of the new year. And on that note, I want to wish all of you a very happy new year. I hope most of you were able to take this time out, relax, and come into the new year fresh. And this new year is going to be the year of Agentforce because we've launched Agentforce last year, and this year we're going to be talking a lot about Agentforce. So while we wait for others to join, why don't all of you start introducing yourselves in the chat? Maybe introduce yourself to me or meet others in the chat and make new friends in the new year. So, hey Eric, hey Niket, hey Tech Lead, the three of you, thank you for being consistently our audience for all of our code lives. We really appreciate all of your effort and time that you take out to join us. Hey, Ladia from Brazil, nice to see you. Thank you, thank you. So I've also seen on LinkedIn a lot of people have completed their AI associate and AI specialist certifications in the end of December and also in the new year. Congratulations to all of you as well. Hope we are going to see more and more completions because the certs are going to remain free until the end of the year. So hey Aditya, um, hey Bhupati, Jayant, I see people are joining us literally from all around the globe. So, as people join, we will get started with today's Code Live, where, if you remember from the title, we are going to be talking about how to set up pre chat forms for Agentforce. So, let me pull up the slides quickly and we will get started. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Aditya. I work as a developer advocate with Salesforce. I've been in the ecosystem for about 11 years now. And for the past 6 months, all we've been talking about is Agentforce. So, we've spent a lot of time skilling up on Agentforce as well. So, now it's your chance not to miss out on the whole wave of AI that is going to be there with us for quite some time now. So before we actually get into the meat of the session, forward-looking statements, please make all your purchasing decisions based on generally available information and not based on what I might say today. So with that, before we talk about pre-chat forms, it's important for us to actually first understand how to build and deploy a service agent because only after building and deploying an agent for service agent will you be able to add pre-chat forms on top of it. So that's how it works. And today we are not going to be covering how to build the service agent because just last week, one of my colleagues, Mohit, he has done a code live where he has shown you right from scratch on how you can create a service agent and how you can set it up on Experience Cloud sites. So I would recommend you go back to YouTube and watch this after today's code live. Don't drop off now. So that is one video that you can look at. And there's also this project on Trailhead, Build Your First Agent with Agentforce. That project also talks about building a service agent and how you deploy it to an Experience Cloud site. So both of these are key resources for you to understand how you can set up a service agent. I'm going to give you a quick recap, but before that, at a very high level, this is how you set up an an Agentforce service agent and make it available on an Experience Cloud site. So on the leftmost, you see the agent itself that you're going to be building using Agent Builder. So that's one part of it. And on the rightmost, you have Experience Cloud, where the agent is going to be surfaced in. Now, in between, you have a lot of configuration that you're supposed to do on Service Cloud. And there are a bunch of things that you configure, like routing rules, messaging channels, deployments, and so on and so forth. Now, this is not just specific to Agentforce, but if you have previously used Einstein bots, or you have even set up a regular chat between customers and service reps, this configuration will already be there in your org because you would have already set it up. And the same configuration can be reused for Agentforce as well. And if in case you haven't used this until now, then all of these are the steps that you will have to take. And you will understand more about this when you watch the other videos that I showed you in the previous slides. Now, what I'll quickly do is show you a very high-level demo of how this is configured so that we can then jump into enabling pre-chat forms. Now, the use case that we're going to take, just so that we maintain continuity from the previous codeLive, the use case is going to remain the same, which is going to be Coral Cloud Resorts. I'm sure you've heard a lot about Coral Cloud Resorts last year. So this is our brand new sample app, which is a fictitious resort that is situated near a beach. And it's just like any other hotel. So customers can go, they can book a room, or the resort also offers experiences. So you can go ahead and book those experiences as well. So that's at a very high level what Coral Cloud Resorts is all about. So if you see, they have a CRM org in which all the different experiences that they offer are stored. And also they store details about contacts who have made previous reservations with them. So here we are looking at a contact called Sophia. And Sophia has an email address and also a membership number. So every contact has been given a unique membership number with the resort. So out of all the other information that is stored, I'm just calling out your attention to the membership number and the email address. So this is the basic setup that they have: experiences and contacts. Now, the first thing that you need to do obviously is to create a service agent, and that's what we have done. And the purpose of this agent is to answer users' questions and help them make bookings, whether they want to book a room or whether they want to book an experience. So this agent will help with that. Now, within the agent, if you notice, we've given it a description, the role, the company, the user, all of the standard configuration that you would expect is already present in this agent. And what we've given is a topic. So we've created a topic called experience management, inside which we've given a description, what is the scope. Essentially, the scope is to make reservations, modify bookings, and so on and so forth. It's the exact scenario that I just described. And along with that, we've given a bunch of different instructions. Now, one of these instructions is important. The reason for that is, let's say you've initiated a chat with Agentforce and you say, I want to make a booking. Now, how does Agentforce know who you are? So that is the first step of any agent, that it must first understand who you are and only then it can assist you. For example, if Sophia is chatting with Agentforce wanting to make a booking, the Agentforce must first understand that it is talking with Sophia and what is the related contact ID of Agentforce, of Sophia. So for that, what we have done is we've created an instruction here. And if you notice, we say that if the customer is not known, you must always ask for their email address and their membership number to get their contact record by running the action get customer details before running any other actions. So essentially, this one instruction is telling Agentforce that if it doesn't know who the customer is, then it must ask for an email and membership number, and then it must send both of those details to an action to get the contact ID back. So that's a very simple instruction that we have given. And there are a bunch of different actions that we've associated with this topic. So like get customer details. So this is the one that gets me the contact ID based on the email and membership number. And of course, we have other actions that get the experience details, get the time slots, booking, so on and so forth. All of that is not relevant to today's session, but just know that there is an agent that's been created that will first ask the user for who they are and only then take relevant action. So this agent has been created and we have already activated the agent. Now, how do you make it available on an Experience Cloud site? So that's the next step. So for that, you will be first creating a channel. Again, we will dive deep into this in a different video. We've already done that. So I'm only going to give you things at a very high level. So channel is how you're going to expose this agent. And when you click on new channel, you can see all the different ways in which you can expose this agent to general public. Either it is using WhatsApp or websites, SMS, Facebook, so on and so forth. And what we have done here is we've created one messaging channel for websites using messaging for in-app and web. So that is this channel. And if we look into this channel, it contains some basic details like what is the name, and most importantly, how are the chats routed. So whenever a customer initiates a chat, I'm going to show this to you in the demo as well. So the moment you click on a message icon, it's going to initiate a chat. Now, where is that chat going to go? Is the customer going to be routed to a service rep? Is the customer going to be routed to Agentforce? Or is the customer going to be routed to an Einstein bot? So how do you configure where the user is routed to? I mean, who is going to take ownership of that particular chat request? So that is controlled by a flow, which is called as omni-channel routing. And there is a flow that you define, which is of type omni-channel flow. So the moment a new chat request comes in, this flow gets executed, and there is this route work element that actually routes this chat request to whomever that you want. So in here, if you notice, we've configured it to route it to an Einstein service agent. And if you see, there are other options. You could have actually routed it to a queue where a service rep is going to pick it up, or you want to route it to an actual user. So that is up to you. And this flow essentially controls how chats are routed depending on whatever is the business logic or the rule engine that you have in place. So very simply, what we are doing here is we don't want to complicate it. So any chat coming in is automatically routed to an Einstein service agent, and CC service agent, the one that we just saw, is the Agentforce agent that is going to receive the chat request. So again, to recap, we created a message channel, which is of type web, and we have attached it to this flow, which is going to route all the incoming chat requests to our service agent. Now, how am I going to attach this messaging channel to an actual website? So this channel just says that it is a web-based channel, but which website is it connected to? So for that, we create what we call a deployment. So a deployment is something that ties a given messaging channel to a particular website. So if you scroll down to the bottom, there are a bunch of code snippets that you have. So in case you want to embed this logic inside an external website that is not built using Salesforce, then you just copy this code and paste it in that external website, and the chat functionality is going to be embedded in that particular website. But if you are in Salesforce, then you need not do this. Within your Experience Cloud site, so here Coral Clouds also has an Experience Cloud site built using LWR. So this is not built using Aura. This is an LWR website. And within this, if you want to embed the messaging, you simply drag and drop this embedded messaging standard component anywhere onto the page layout. So what I've done here is I've pasted it here. I mean, I've put the component right over here somewhere. It's difficult to see, but it's just that you need to just drag and drop that component and it becomes available. And how do you know that you've dragged and dropped it successfully? On the bottom right, I'm sure you're not able to see the bottom right. So let me adjust the layout for that. So on the bottom right, if you notice, there is this chat icon. So this is how you know that you've dragged and dropped the component successfully. So it's as simple as that. You create the deployment and you drag and drop the embedded messaging component. And then that's how you attach that deployment to a website. Now, this is the basic. This is all that we have done in the previous codeLive. So once deployed successfully, this is how the website is going to look. If you see, it is built on Experience Cloud. It shows a bunch of details. Now, how do you initiate a conversation? You click the messaging icon, and it is going to show you a pop-up. And in just a couple of seconds, you should be able to see the chat initiated. If not, you can always refresh the page. And yep, you see the chat. It's the CC service agent that has taken up your chat request, and it's going to say, I'm a service assistant. How can I help you? So I just say I want to make a booking. So Agentforce has received your message. It's thinking, and notice what it does. Because we have configured it in the instructions that it must ask for an email and membership number, it's gone ahead and it's asked me that, and I'm going to paste in those details. So I say the email address is so and so, and my membership number is so and so. And then notice what it does. It's able to validate that I'm in fact a contact. And if you notice the response, it is very personalized. It says, "Great, Sophia. I have your details. What experience would you like to book?" So that's how you start talking to a service agent, and that's how we have configured this service agent. So I'm not saying that every agent must be configured this way. In our business requirement, this is how we have decided that user identity must be established. So this is a typical Agentforce service agent in action. Now let's get into the technical details and see how it really works behind the scenes. So the moment a user initiates a chat, based on the deployment that you have configured, it goes to a messaging channel. And in our case, if you remember from the configuration I've shown you, the messaging channel is going to be a web channel. And what that does is it creates what we call a messaging session record in the background. So every time a new chat is initiated, a new messaging session gets created. And every messaging session is associated with a messaging user. So a messaging user is different from a Salesforce user or an Experience Cloud user or whatever user it is. A messaging user is just another record that denotes who is the user that has initiated a particular messaging session. Now, once that messaging session is created, that record ID is sent to the omni-channel flow that gets triggered. So remember the omni-channel flow that I've shown you where it does the route work and so on and so forth. One of the inputs that the omni-channel flow receives is going to be the record ID of that particular messaging session. And that is how this session is being routed to different people. In our case, we have configured the omni-channel flow to route it to Agentforce, which is why it routes the particular messaging session to Agentforce. Now, how does Agentforce have context of what is happening? How does it know who is the user? How does it know what session got routed to it? So the Agentforce agent can actually refer back to a particular messaging session. So any details stored within the messaging session will be available to Agentforce. So that's how a web-based chat works. And let me actually show it to you on how it is. So for example, this was the omni-channel flow. And if you notice, one of the inputs is going to be the record ID. And this record ID is going to be the record ID of a particular messaging session. And here I have developer console where I'm querying for all the messaging sessions that got created. So if you notice, I just refreshed and a new session has come up. So we have the ID of the session, who is the end user, what is the type, what is the channel from which the session has come in. In this case, it's going to be the ESA channel. That is what we set up, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of details that are stored in this messaging session object. Now let me take this and open it up in the UI so that you can see how a messaging session looks like. So here you have the messaging session. You have a bunch of details like when was the start time, so on and so forth. In case you end the chat, it's going to show the end time as well. And who is the user who has initiated the session. So in this case, the user is going to be the guest because we have invoked the chat from an Experience Cloud site. So the messaging user is always going to be the guest. Now, why is it important to note what is happening over here? It is important because let's say your agent is unable to handle, when I say agent, Agentforce, if an Agentforce agent is unable to handle this particular request, it gets routed to a service rep. And whenever it is routed to a service rep is going to look at this screen to identify who the user is that has initiated this chat. Now, if you notice on this whole page, there is no way I can identify which is the user that has initiated this chat. Because what Agentforce has done is, in its context, it has requested for the user's details. Like it has requested for the email membership number, and it was able to understand that it was Sophia, and it is able to help Sophia. But when you look at the record in the backend, there is nowhere that you can see that this particular messaging session belongs to Sophia. That is because we have not associated that contact. So to a given messaging user, you can associate a contact, and which is when you notice what will happen if I associate Sophia's record and I refresh this page. You can see this messaging session now refers to the messaging user contact is going to be Sophia. So this way you are able to tie a particular messaging session to a contact. And this is going to help a service rep understand who is requesting a chat and work with them accordingly. So this is an important step that was missing. Now, if the Agentforce agent was able to address that chat without having to transfer back to a service rep, you wouldn't have any problems. It would all work fine, which is what you have seen. But this is the off chance where it gets routed and there is no tracking data available. So that's the first problem that you have. Now that context must be given, and it's a best practice to actually establish this context, and that's something that pre-chat forms can help you with. Now you understand why I was talking about all of this. Pre-chat form can help you establish this context. Now talking about the messaging session itself, and if you go back to the agent builder, you can see that along with all the topics, actions, and so on and so forth, there is a tab here called context. And within the context, you have messaging session. And here, all the fields from the messaging session object will be shown. And you can include certain fields as context for the agent and exclude certain fields. So that is up to you. But the key takeaway here being, whatever is the data that is stored on the messaging session object is available as context to your Agentforce agents. So that is the second point that we need to remember, that an Agentforce agent has context of the messaging session that was routed to it. Now, as you know, if you create custom actions, you can give Agentforce access to any data that you want. But out of the box, in terms of context, messaging session is available to it by default. So these are the two important things that we need to know, that Agentforce can access messaging sessions, and the messaging session must actually include some context about the user so that it becomes easier for us. So that way what happens, instead of you or the agent asking the end user to enter their name and the membership number and so on and so forth, it can actually come back and see on this messaging session who the contact is, because it already has context. All we need to do is put the contact details back onto the messaging session. That way, Agentforce now knows who the contact is without having to ask the end user explicitly. Now, this is the problem that we want to solve with pre-chat. And let's go back to the slides. And pre-chat forms for Agentforce. Typical use cases include setting context for the agent, which is what we have talked about. Establishing user identity. So how do you know which user is talking? So pre-chat forms can help with that. And the third point is advanced routing. Now, let's say you have set up your routing or the omni-channel flow in a way that all the chats are not routed to Agentforce. Instead, you have some filter criteria. If maybe the customer is a VIP customer, instead of you routing it to Agentforce, you are routing it to a service rep that is dedicated to handle VIP customers. I don't know. It might be a use case. So if you have something like that, and if you have a complex branching algorithm on how to route the chat or the messaging session, that is where pre-chat forms can help you. because you take some minimum information from the customer. Like instead of the agent asking for the information, the moment you initiate a chat itself, the user tells their email address and membership number. You do some background logic. And if you think it should be routed to Agentforce, you route it to Agentforce. If you think it should be routed to somebody else, you route it to somebody else. So that's how you can use pre-chat forms to set the whole thing up. Now, with the addition of pre-chat forms, how does the flow now look like? It almost looks like the previous flow itself, but once the user initiates the chat, they first fill a pre-chat form. So it's a form which contains a bunch of fields that the user fills. And these form values directly get mapped to channel variables. That is what we are going to see in just a bit. Don't get confused. All the form values are going to be mapped to channel variables first. And whenever the messaging channel triggers the omni-channel flow, along with the record ID coming in from the messaging session, these channel variables are also passed as an input to the omni-channel flow. Now, this is again important to remember because you might assume that the moment a user fills the data in a pre-chat form, we automatically save those values on the messaging session. That doesn't happen. We do not save the pre-chat form values onto the messaging session. Rather, those form values are just stored as variables on the messaging channel, and the messaging channel passes those variables to the flow whenever that flow is triggered. So it is you who have to decide what you want to do with the record ID, what you want to do with the pre-chat values. All of it you will have to decide right within the omni-channel flow. So that business logic is completely in your hands. So once that is done, the rest of the process is the same. The flow routes it to whomever you want. In this case, it is Agentforce, and Agentforce can in turn refer to your messaging session object that you have just seen. Okay, so this is at a very high level what pre-chat is capable of, what messaging is, what messaging channels are, and how all of it works. It might be maybe a little bit confusing if you're listening to all of this from the first, all of this for the first time, but I'm going to show you a demo. In fact, this is a codeLive, so we are going to walk through most of the steps wherein it will make it much more clear. So today we'll be using pre-chat in order to validate the details of the guest. So instead of Agentforce asking the user for their email and membership number, we are going to proactively provide that information using pre-chat forms. Now, all of this was in context of a guest user. Now, what if the user is logged in? If a user is already logged into Experience Cloud and they initiate a chat, you need not ask them to fill the same details again because they already logged in. You know who they are. Now, how can you pass that information to Agentforce? So that's something that we are also going to see. Then we are also going to customize the pre-chat form using LWC. So by default, the form is going to be out of the box form, but you can put in an LWC to make the look and feel different, and it also can support some of the business logic that you have. So that's in a nutshell what we are going to do, and let's actually dive into that. And before diving in, again, quick recap. Remember what we have done. We have launched a chat, and then you said you wanted to make a booking. You provided the information that the agent was asking for, and then you keep the conversation going. But now what I want to do is I want to enable pre-chat. So for that, the first and foremost step you do is you go to the embedded service deployments. So remember, deployments is the place where you're attaching a particular channel to a website. So that's where you go. And here you have an option called pre-chat. So here you can see the status right now is inactive, which is why the pre-chat form was not being shown. So what you can do is you can click edit pre-chat and then first activate the pre-chat feature. So that is going to activate it. And now what are the fields that you want to show in the pre-chat form? So if you see, there are 4 fields that you can show out of the box, which are these standard fields called first name, last name, email, and subject. But for our business requirement, we need the email and membership number. So obviously, first and foremost, I'm going to add the email and set it to required. And then since there is no membership number, I want to create a custom field. So, and notice it shows the field type on what it is, and the membership number is a text field, and I'll have to map it to a channel variable. And if you notice, there are no channel variables that we created yet. So the first step is not to actually come in and create your pre-chat form, but is to go ahead and create those channel variables, which you can do from messaging settings. Go to your channel, which you want to create the variables for. And at the bottom, you have what we call custom parameters. So here is where if your pre-chat form needs something that is not the name, email address, or subject, then you'll have to create something custom. So here I'll create a custom parameter and I'll call it membership number. And the data type is only one that is available, that is a string, and I'll give it a maximum length of, let's say, 20. So what I'm doing is on the channel, I'm creating a variable that can store the incoming value from the pre-chat form. So that is what this is. So now this is done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the deployments, go back to the web deployment and edit the pre-chat, add the email, make it required. And this time I'm going to choose again text and the channel variable. If you notice, now I'm able to see it, called the membership number. So here I have two fields that I want to show on the pre-chat form called name, email, and membership number. So these are what we call visible pre-chat fields. What you also have is hidden pre-chat fields, and these are fields that need not be shown to the user, but internally you want to set the value. So let's say instead of asking the user for their email and membership number, you don't show anything on the pre-chat form, but you have hidden fields, maybe called the contact ID, and you pass in the value of the contact ID to the pre-chat form. Now, how do you pass in the value to a hidden field is something that you will see a little bit later. But just know that if you want to show something to the user, you can. If you want to set the value of a hidden field, you can. So both of these are a possibility with pre-chat fields. Typically, hidden pre-chat fields can be used in case you want to capture, like I said, the contact ID, user ID, any identifiers instead of the user having to paste them in the visible chat fields. You can pre-populate them as hidden values. So this is what it is. So I've configured the pre-chat form and you notice now it says active. And then what I can do is I can publish it. So the thing with deployments is that anytime you make a change to the deployment, you need to publish the deployment for it to take effect. So I will publish it while this task runs in the background. So remember from the slides, what is happening? We have created a pre-chat form. The values have come into the pre-chat form. The user is going to fill them in, and those are going to be mapped to the variables on my messaging channel. Now, the next step is whenever the omni-channel flow is initiated, these variables are passed in as flow variables. If you have forgot about that, let me show it back to you. So the user fills the form. They are mapped to channel variables. You have already created a custom variable, and standard variables are always there for the first name, last name, email, and subject. These variables are also passed in to the omni-channel flow. So that's the next step. But how is it passed? Now that's a bigger question. So if you go back to messaging settings and go back to the channel and you scroll all the way to the bottom, along with custom parameters, you find a section called parameter mappings. So here is where you specify which channel variable is mapped to which flow variable. So your omni-channel flow is going to have a bunch of input variables that you can define on your own. And the values coming in from the messaging channel can be mapped to those input values. So that's how it works. It's not an automatic mapping. You will have to create a mapping between the messaging channel variable name and the flow input variable name. So that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to create a new mapping. So here the parameter first is going to be email, and I'm going to say the flow variable name is going to be email. I haven't yet created the flow variable name. I'm going to create it in the flow, but I'm just specifying the name over here. And then I create one more mapping, and I'm going to say membership number, and the flow variable name is going to be membership number. So that's the mapping that I have done. So I have two channel variables, email and membership number. Those are mapped to my flow variables called email and membership number. And the values for these variable names on the channel are coming in from the pre-chat form, and Salesforce is taking care of that. You need not worry about it. Now I have the email, I have the membership number, and the flow, as I mentioned before, is that one place where you can put all of your business logic so that your agent has as much context about the customer as you can possibly give it. So what I'm going to do here now is go to flows, and the flow name is route to ESA. That's what we have configured on this messaging channel. So this is going to be my flow. And if you see, it's an omni-channel flow, and then there is only one resource, which is one input variable, which is record ID. Now I'm supposed to create two more, which is going to be email, which is going to be the exact same name that I have given in the configuration before. So it's going to be text available for input. And then I'll create one more resource again, which is variable. This time I'm going to call it membership number. And the data type again is going to be text and available for input. So now, because I have created that mapping, this flow is going to get the inputs of the record ID of the messaging session, the email, and the membership number given in the pre-chat form. Now, what do I want to do within this flow? So remember, this was our messaging session. Now, what I want to do is, first, based on the email and membership number, I want to query for the contact. And once I've queried for the contact, I want to update the messaging user. So if I go to this particular messaging user, you can see there is a lookup to a contact. So this is something that I want to update. And how do I navigate to the messaging user? So this is my messaging session record, and messaging session record has a lookup to the messaging user, and messaging user in turn has a lookup to the contact. So that's how it works. So you do not associate a session with a contact. A session is going to have a particular messaging user. The messaging user is associated to a contact. Now, don't be confused by the messaging user contact that you see here. This is not a lookup field, it's a formula field. Because if you see, you cannot edit this. So this is a formula field coming in from messaging user object. So the contact associated to the messaging user is what is being shown here. Now, our goal is to do this. We take a given messaging session and we attach the contact that we find using the pre-chat variables to this particular messaging session. Now let's go ahead and do that. I mean, if you're familiar with flows, then I think you'll already have an idea on how this is done. So first and foremost, I'll add a decision. Is email and membership present? And I'll say yes, it is present if email is not equal to blank and membership number is not equal to blank. I mean, you can obviously use is null and all of that. I'm not talking about best practices on how to do it. You know it better. So first and foremost, we are saying if both of these are present, only then we are going to go ahead and create our logic. So let's say email and membership numbers are present. First and foremost, we are going to query for the contact record. So find contact. The object that we find is the contact object. And what are the conditions? Email equals email and membership number equals membership number. So I'm breezing through this because it's a pretty simple query. I'm trying to find the contact that matches the name and membership number. And I'm only going to store the first record. And what I'm going to do with this. So with this, I have to update the messaging user object. So I'll create an update records element over here, and I'll say update messaging user, and I want to specify the conditions. So it is called I don't know, messaging end user. So messaging user is the object, and which messaging user do I update? Now the messaging user has a record ID, obviously, so we are going to try and filter by that ID. Now what do I have as an input to this particular flow? I have the record ID of the messaging session, and on the messaging session object, which is already queried, I'm storing all the fields. And if you remember, on the messaging session object, there is a lookup to the messaging user. So in order to query for the messaging user, I need to get the record ID of the messaging user from the messaging session object, and the field is going to be messaging user. So that's what I do. Update messaging user, and the ID is equal to, from the messaging session, the messaging end user's record ID is what I need to take. So essentially what this gives me is the messaging user that is related to this particular messaging session. So that's what I'm going to be updating. And what do I need to update? I need to update the contact ID. And what is the value of the contact ID? It is going to be the output of find contact. So here I have the output from find contact. And from here I'm going to take in the record ID. So this is what I have created. Again, just to recap, what we are doing here is this flow is going to run irrespective of any condition, whether pre-chat form is filled or not, it's going to run. So what we have done here, in case these values are coming in from the pre-chat form, only then we are going through this logic. If not, it's routed by default. So within this, we are first trying to find the contact that belongs with this email and membership number. And once the contact is found, we are updating the messaging user record that belongs to this particular messaging session. So that ensures that this particular contact is associated with the session and also the user. Now this is important because an Agentforce service agent can pick up context right from this object. Now what I'm going to do, now that I have updated my flow, I'm going to save it as a new version. And then I'm going to activate it. So that was my first step, where I have created pre-chat form. I've mapped the pre-chat form variables to messaging channel variables. And then from there on, it has been mapped to the flow. And within the flow, I'm taking these values and I'm updating the messaging user record. So this ensures I have my messaging session accurate. Now, how do I tell the agent that it has to now look at the messaging session? Because if you notice in the topic, in the instruction, what I told is that if the customer is not known, you must ask for their email address and membership number. But now we are saying there is a possibility that you may know who the customer is. So how am I going to instruct the agent for that? So for which I'm going to update the instruction very slightly. I'm going to read it out to you as well. So the basic stuff, before running any actions, you must ensure the contact is known. If the contact is not known, you must use the get customer details action to get the contact record. Until here, it is the same. But what I have changed is if the end user contact ID in context variables is filled, that is on this messaging session, this is the API name for that. End user contact ID is the API name for this particular field. So what I'm telling the agent is that if the end user contact ID in the context variables is filled, use that as an input to the action. If not, then ask the user for their email and membership number to run the action. So I've made the instruction a little bit more elaborate by saying that you can now refer to the context variable. If the context variable is empty, then you go ahead and ask for more details. If not, you already know who the customer is. So I'm just giving the additional instruction. So with that, I'll go ahead and activate. And now let's refresh and see how the whole thing works. So you notice now that I've initiated my chat, instead of the chat coming up by default, it's now showing the pre-chat form. So this is how the pre-chat form looks like. And here I need to fill in the details, which is the email and membership number. So let me copy and paste that from my notes. So what I've done here is I've given the name, I've given the membership number. And now the moment I hit start conversation, what happens is both of these details are going to go into the messaging channel, which in turn will go to the flow. The flow will find a contact and update the messaging session. So all of that will happen. So let me click on start conversation. So in just a bit, you will now see that the agent has joined and it says, hi, my service assistant, how can I help you? And this time I say, I want to book an experience, and hopefully this works. And notice this time, it is not asking me for the email and membership number because it already knows who I am. It says, sure thing, can you provide me with a date? Now, just to be sure, what if I put this question, who am I? Okay, what is my name? Okay, the agent is sometimes not going to answer this question, but the other times when I tested it, it actually said that your name is Sophia. But you know, this is LLM. We don't know when it will have strict guidelines. So yeah, I can assure you that in fact we are working as Sophia. But how am I going to give you the proof? So the proof is again going to be present in the developer console, where this time I'm going to execute the same query. I refresh the grid and you see the latest entry now has the end user contact ID populated. So if I now go back to this particular, let me duplicate this, messaging session record, you can actually see that it is already being mapped to Sophia Rodriguez. Even though it says guest and all, the contact lookup is what we have given to Sophia. So that's exactly what we have achieved. So this way, I'm giving context. I'm actually updating the messaging session itself to include context about the contact. And now the agent knows about all of this, which is why it didn't ask me for the email and membership number. Rather, it just wants to go ahead and book. Now, this is how you work with pre-chat forms. And this is one of the use cases where you give the identity of the user using a form. Now, this was step number one. It all works good. You're very happy. But what is step number two? So step number two is, let's say Sophia is not working as a guest user, but rather Sophia has already logged into your Experience Cloud site and then trying to initiate a chat. So then you have two options. So let's say Sophia is logged in. I'm going to log in just a bit, but let's say Sophia is logged in. In that case, you have two options. One is to pre-populate the email and membership number, or to skip the pre-chat form altogether. Now, unfortunately, once you enable pre-chat, you cannot skip a pre-chat form depending on conditions. So the pre-chat form will always be shown. All you can do is pre-populate these values in case the user is already logged in. So that's something that you can achieve. So in that case, what would happen is once Sophia logs in, the email and membership number will be pre-populated, and all Sophia needs to do is click on start conversation. But if that's not the experience what you're looking for, you want a more seamless experience and you don't even want to show um, these fields pre-populated, then you'll have to go with the LWC approach, which I'm going to talk about in just a bit. So first and foremost, how do you let the pre-chat form know about the details of a logged in user? So for that purpose, we have what we call the pre-chat API, and this is very well documented on how to use the pre-chat API. So it's nothing but a bunch of JavaScript code that you go and add to your website. So with this, you can actually pre-populate the fields that are present on the pre-chat form. So let's actually go and do that. So here we have the builder, and you edit the head markup. Okay, maybe the session timed out. Let me quickly refresh, and in the meanwhile, copy my code snippet. Now, this is not the case only if you want to pass in the details of the logged in user, but let's say you want to pass in any data to the pre-chat form. Previously, I mentioned there are a few hidden fields. What if to the pre-chat form you want to send in the browser from which the user is accessing it, or whether it is a desktop device or a mobile device? So all such details you can pass into the hidden fields using this API. So it's not always about passing the identity. It's about passing any data that you want to the pre-chat form using JavaScript code. So you click on advanced, edit the head markup. And for our use case, I want to send in the values of the email and membership number. So essentially there is a listener that you write, which is going to be on embedded messaging ready. And then here is the pre-chat API that you access using JavaScript. Again, it is all very well documented. You can just copy paste the code from there. Now using this, you can send in any data that you want to the pre-chat form. If you're sending it to the visible fields, you will call the set visible pre-chat fields method. If you're sending it to the hidden fields, you will say set hidden pre-chat fields. So that's the only difference, but you pass in this data. Now, if you notice, I have hard coded the details here. But how do I get the details of the logged in user? Now, this is the head markup, and this is not a Lightning Web Component. So I will not be able to write a query over here in order to get the user details. But then I need to pass these details only from the head markup. So how do I achieve this? How do I ensure I'm querying the user details and then I'm sending those user details dynamically using the pre-chat API? The approach is simple. The approach here is going to be you create a Lightning Web Component that will query for the user details. And once the details are queried, you are going to fire an event. And this event is going to contain those user details. And this JavaScript code is going to listen to that event. So whenever you pass an event from a Lightning Web Component, it's not just the parent components that can listen to it, but if you set bubbles and compose to true, it will traverse all the way to the top of the DOM. So from your Lightning Web Component, you will fire an event which will traverse all the way to the top. And in this JavaScript code, you're going to write an event listener that will listen to your Lightning Web Component event, which is going to contain the data of the user. And then that information is going to be passed in to this API. So I'll show you how it works. Again, all of this code is there in this documentation. So all you need to do is just copy paste and tweak it very slightly. So here I have a component that I have created that I want to put on the Experience Cloud page. And what I'm doing here is I'm using get record. Those of you familiar with LWC, you will know it's very easy to query for the user details. You have the user ID fields that you want to query. I have a wire decorator that is going to fire this particular request. And once I get the user data back, notice that I'm firing an event. I'm firing a custom event of type user info in which I'm including the email and membership number. And I have set bubbles to true and compose to true so that this event traverses all the way to the top of the DOM. So this is the basic LWC code that I have that queries for this user information. Now, once I have created this component, all I need to do is add it to my page. So I have the get logged in user details. This is the component that I deployed. So you can add it to the footer because this needs to run on all the pages. So what this is going to do is, ideally the HTML cannot, it can be blank, but just so that I know where I put this component, I just added dummy text here saying that this component is there, so on and so forth. It's not mandatory that you put text here. So the moment I add this component to my page, what happens? This component runs because it's a wire decorator. It runs automatically, gets the logged in user details and fires off a custom event with the name user info. And within my JavaScript code, now I need to write an event listener for that user info, get the details, and then pass it down to my pre-chat API. So again, I go to settings, edit head markup, and here I'll paste the script. So notice the very first thing that I'm doing is, instead of listening to the embedded messaging ready, I'm listening to the user info event that has been fired by my Lightning Web component. Using this event, I'm able to get the email and membership number into my JavaScript code. And then I'm going to pass in that email and membership number down to my pre-chat variables. And notice you can also set whether that field can be edited by the user or not. Now, if the user is logged in, they will use their own email address. So you need not make them edit it. So I'll set editable to false. Now, again, it is in your business needs, whether you want to keep it editable, that is up to you. So what we'll do simply is we'll now save this, and then I will publish my site. So what's happening now is the site gets published, and this time, whenever I reload the page, it will try to get the details of the logged in user. If the user is logged in, those details are going to be pre-populated. So that's something that's going to happen. Deployment generally takes some time, 1 or 2 minutes. It should be okay. But let me just try and see if it happens. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat or comments. Once the live stream is done, also I can look at the comments and try and address them. Yep, I think the deployment has happened. Let's see. So this is a guest user, so the details should not be populated. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and log in as Sophia. Okay, let me try that again. Log into experience as Sophia. You can see since a custom event for Sophia, and this time, okay, it still did not work. But ideally it should be pre-populated. Oh yeah, I think I made some mistake in the copy paste. Email, membership number, so on and so forth. Where did contact ID? Okay. So this was me testing things out. So let's actually save it, republish. Yeah, the link to this documentation, I will add it to the YouTube video, and also I'll put it in the comment section of the LinkedIn stream once the session is done. I cannot send a chat to you right now, so I'm limited by that, but don't worry, come back to the video. You will find the link to this over there. Hopefully, if the deployment is successful, I can show it to you working. If not, we can troubleshoot it together, but yeah, it's working over here. So notice the email and membership number are pre-populated. The email might be slightly different because on the user object, I've given a different email address just so that I don't get emails. But notice that both of these are now not editable. So this is how you work with it if it is a logged in user. And that was our second scenario. First, we set up a pre-chat form where user could fill it on their own. But if the user is logged in, then we are going to pre-populate these details based on the information that we query from their user object. Now, there can be a third scenario as well. Like I mentioned, if you think this UI is not very intuitive for you, if you think you should not be showing logged in users a form at all, then one option you have is to override the pre-chat form using a Lightning Web Component. So again, there is documentation available for this as well, which I'm going to paste again in the comments. You can create a custom pre-chat form using LWC, which is what I have done. The target is going to be snap-in pre-chat message. Again, don't worry, it is available in the documentation. Now, because it's a Lightning Web Component, you can have the UI be whatever you want. So for guests, you can show the form. If it is not a guest, you can just show a message saying, hi, I'm the agent, click the button below to get started. So again, the implementation is up to you. For guests, you can have a certain implementation. For not guests, you can have a certain implementation. But the form is there. Like the pre-chat functionality, once enabled, is always enabled. Whether you're showing the form or not is in your control once you have created the Lightning Web Component. So this is what it is I have created. Now within the Lightning Web Component, let's say once you click on submit, how are the details going to be submitted to the pre-chat form? So for that, you'll have to again fire an event called pre-chat submit. Again, this is available in the documentation. From a Lightning Web Component, if you want to fire an event to submit the pre-chat form, then you will fire an event called pre-chat submit, within which you can again pass in whatever information that you want. Here it's going to be email, membership number. If you want to pass the contact ID, hidden fields, all of it is up to you. It's just that you fire this event whenever you want to initiate the chat. Until the chat is initiated within the Lightning Web Component, you can do whatever you want. For example, Bhupati Raja just asked a question, which is a good question, so I'll post it here. So can we make an API call from Agentforce conversation, SMS OTP verification before making any? I'm assuming it is a high-risk task. That's a very good point. Yes, you can have Agentforce do this by creating custom actions. So you can have a custom action that triggers an OTP, another custom action that verifies an OTP, and you can instruct the agent to fire this whenever there is a high-risk task that is conducted. The other option obviously is going to be using Lightning Web Components. So what you can do here within your Lightning Web Component, you can show the email membership number, but the moment you click on start conversation, you don't initiate the conversation. Maybe you send them an OTP. Maybe you validate their details first. And only once it is validated, then you call this dispatch event to submit the form and initiate the chat. So that's in your control with Lightning Web Components. So this is something that I have created. Now, how do I ensure I override the standard pre-chat form with a custom pre-chat form? So for that, you go to embedded service deployments, and you have a section here called custom UI components. So you add a new custom component, and any Lightning Web component that you have created using the XML pre-chat snap-in, that's going to be shown up here. And you can select that, you click on save, and then click on publish. So again, publish is going to take some time, but in the meanwhile, we can take some questions. But overall, this is what I wanted to talk about in today's live stream. I'm sure it was a little bit of a longer stream, but I felt it was important that you know how the entire pre-chat framework works and what is important to give context to the Agentforce agent. So messaging session, the most important object, whatever you want with it, you can store in that object. You can create custom fields, use the omni-channel flow to populate those fields, and your Agentforce can leverage that context in order for any operations that it can do. Now, whether it is a logged in user, if it is a logged in user, you have two options. One is you use the pre-chat API that I have just shown you, or you can override the entire pre-chat form using a Lightning Web Component and then have your own implementation on top of it. So that's basically how it is. So let me try and see if the deployment was successful so that I can show you how this pre-chat thing works. Yes, it's a guest user. So you notice the form looks a little bit different, which is why it is showing start conversation. If you were logged in, then it will show you the thing that says, "Hi, Sophia. Let's get started." So it's just going to be text over here. So that's basically what I had in today's um, live stream. We have validated the user details. Once the user is logged in, we pass that information to Agentforce. And we have also customized the pre-chat form using Lightning Web Components. We didn't look at it at a lot of detail because the documentation is already there. All you need to do is fire the event and embed the component. What is the implementation that you do inside the LWC is totally in your control. So we've already seen everything in action. So with that, connect with us. Like I'm sure if you're watching the stream, it means you're already connected with us, so which is good. But if we were not able to answer any of your questions, we in the sense please post it in the dev community or on the comments on YouTube or LinkedIn. I will try and address it. But if not, please post it in the dev community. Keep following us on LinkedIn and YouTube for more content, weekly content, so on and so forth. Stay tuned, and we will make sure you're up to date on everything that is happening with Agentforce. So with that, if there are no more questions, I actually don't see any questions. We will wrap it up if there are no questions. Either you understood all of it or understood none of it. If you understood all of it, it is very good. If you understood none of it, then please rewatch the recording. And then if you have questions, please post it in the comments. All right. So with that, I would like to thank all of you. Thank you for staying in for quite some time. We will break this episode down on YouTube so it's easier for you to re-navigate. But thank you all of you. Have a great rest of the day. Have a great rest of the week. And until I see you again, goodbye.